NBE3U Video Assignment by Cameron Prang. Richard Wagamies once said, "It's all we are in the end, our stories." Today, you will see my view and story on the following topics: residential schools, the unfairness by the government on First Nations people, the This River documentary, tobacco ties, and Medicine Walk by Richard Wagamies. Residential schools was where the Canadian government put Native children to make them change and forget their native ways. The government had officials going door to door, picking the children up and taking them away. In an interview we watched with A.G. George, she told us her story about being taken to Lejack School, a residential school between Fort Fraser and Fraser Lake, British Columbia. What I've seen on many websites is that the children were taken to the schools to, quote-unquote, kill the Indian in the child. As A.G. George explained, the children were beaten if they tried to practice any of their culture, and she was beaten because she attempted to run away. I truly believe this is very wrong and should have never happened. Every person, regardless of ethnicity, is human, and we should all be treated in the same manner. Unfortunately, this still doesn't happen. In the Native community around Winnipeg's Red River, the police won't help look for lost, missing, or murdered First Nations women. The police say that they'll probably just be home a little bit late. Because the police haven't taken action yet, the community has started a group called Drag the Red. Drag the Red is a group of volunteers that dredge and search the banks of the Red River looking for the murdered and missing people of the community. The police not helping in the search is unacceptable. This is a continuation of the same sort of mistreatment that the government gave First Nations people in residential schools. The Canadian government was misguided in its attempts to clean up its problems with the First Nation communities, but they are continuing to make mistakes by ignoring them. Understanding the plight of First Nations communities will help me if I become a police officer. I will treat everyone fairly and try to eliminate these problems. In the book Medicine Walk, there are connections to Native men not being treated fairly. When Eldon was serving in the Korean War, he and another Native man were always sent for patrol first because the commanders didn't care if the two Native guys got killed. In the case of Eldon, war contributed to his loss of culture. He lost his father to war when he was young and only had his mother to tell stories while they moved from work camp to work camp in non-Native communities. All this led to Eldon drinking and slowly becoming an alcoholic, which damaged his life, and later on Franklin's life too. One thing you never hear about in the book Medicine Walk is the use of tobacco ties. Tobacco ties are normally a 4x4 inch piece of fabric tied up into a small pouch with tobacco inside. They are mainly red in color. Before this course, I never knew what tobacco ties were, or what they were about, or used for. I now understand that they are used in a way to thank someone as a non-verbal contract. When Jody Alexander came to our class to talk about tobacco ties, our teacher had offered her a tobacco tie, and she declined going to another school on that date because they had not offered her one. I find it good that small cultural acts like the tobacco ties has lived on despite all the pressures on this culture. What I would like you to take away from this digital story is little under your know of First Nations. We should strive to learn from these cultures and support them so they can strive. The children that went to residential schools should not be fighting to find out what their culture is. They have lost knowledge for their culture and now need to regain it through storytelling and talking to elders. Tobacco ties are one method that anyone can use to seek teachings from their elders. The book Medicine Walk is a symbolic story of a dying culture and should be an alarm to save it before it is totally lost.